A couple seconds, we have some people strolling in. Good morning. Glad you all could make it. I woke up this morning with this distinct sense of sensation of fall in my throat. I woke up and I was like, oh, seasons are changing. Glad everyone could get here. I know there's a marathon going on today, but I think they may have changed the route, so I know a lot of people were able to make it. Last year, people just came around in circles and couldn't couldn't get across the bridges because most of them were closed. So we made it today. Anyone here for the first time? Hey, welcome. Glad you guys can make it. Today what we'll do is go through a meditation. We'll have some mindful movement. I'll give a Dharma talk. We have a potluck today, right, Kate? So there's going to be lots of food and goodies afterwards for those who remain. And if it's your first time here, I'll do a little bit of guidance in the meditation, but feel free to practice whatever your body and mind need at the time. I'll do a little bit of guided meditation, and then I'll leave you to your own devices. And I just hope it's a worthwhile experience. All right. I think we're all in. Let's plop into the present moment and see what awaits today. As we begin, just take a quick check at your posture. We forget sometimes when we start into our sits how that initial posture affects us about 10-15 minutes later when gravity takes hold. So just make sure that you're comfortable. If you can get your back upright, that can be important as well. Take note of your legs and your feet. Make sure you got the circulation going where it needs to be. And begin with 3 long, slow, deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Taking deep breaths in the beginning of practice will lower your blood pressure and also cleans some of that stale air out of the lungs and primes our pump for mindfulness of breathing. But before we engage in mindful breathing, I like to do what the Buddha invites us to do, which is to begin with a gratitude contemplation just for a few minutes. Can be helpful, as the Buddha says, to gladden the mind, to begin our practice with reminding us of something that we're grateful for, something in our life that makes us happy, brings us joy, a person, an experience, a place that nourishes us or nurtures us. Call that experience or someone to your heart, to your mind, and just remember what it feels like to be happy and grateful. Could be something simple like you got up on time this morning. Could be something more profound for you. Anything that's going well in your life, something that makes you happy. And see if you can bring your awareness to those sensations of gratitude. What does it feel like when you think to yourself, something in my life is going well. This person loves me or cherishes me. See if you can bring your attention to the actual sensations in the body. When you're happy or grateful for something, where do those sensations rest inside your body? So with a sense of ease, this gladdening of the heart, let us turn our attention to our home base, which is our breathing, mindfulness of breath. We use the breath as a focal point because it's always here with us. Every moment, we are either in an inhale, the peak of a breath, or an exhale, arising and passing away, moment to moment. The breath provides a very easy doorway into the present. You can attend to the breath in two ways. You can be aware of the breathing in the belly with the rising and falling of the abdomen and perhaps the chest. And you can also keep your awareness where the breath comes into the nose, just above the upper lips, into the nostrils. And you can hold your attention there as the breath comes in and out. Sometimes people like to do both, keeping the awareness both on the rising and falling of the belly and trying to take in the actual sensations of the breathing at the nose. Over time, you may even be able to tell the difference between the warmth and coolness of the breath. The inhale will be slightly cooler than the exhale as the air has become warmed by the lungs. Every breath has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each breath arises, stays for a bit, and passes away. When we engage in mindful breathing, we want to pay particular attention to the actual, real-life sensations of the breath, the actual feeling in the body of that life energy coming in and out. You may notice, without much effort actually, that the mind might have its own agenda. It may wander away. This is what the mind does. It wanders. When the mind wanders from the object we've chosen, we easily and effortlessly invite the mind to come back to the breath. We try to accept that it has wandered. We try not to go to war with the mind, as we say. It's not a failure when the mind wanders off. It's just its nature. We accept that the mind wanders. So when it wanders, we just accept it and gently and easily invite it back to the breath. At times you may find that it's difficult to actually get in touch with the sensations of breathing. And that's okay. Sometimes the breath will be more distinct than others. You can do one of two things. You may consider taking just 2 or 3 deeper, more intentional inhalations to remind yourself of where those sensations are, either in the belly or at the nostrils. Or you can just accept that there are no sensations of breathing in this moment, and that's okay too. Just keep your attention on the belly or on the nose, and with some patience we can just wait for new sensations to arise. On occasion, it can be helpful to take note, where does the mind actually go when it wanders? In general, it ends up in one of 2 places. It takes a little stroll back to the past, or it takes a little stroll into the future. You might notice that there are thoughts, concerns, worries, perhaps things left unfinished from your work week or family obligations. You may be contemplating what you're going to be having for brunch after the sit. The mind likes to take a little stroll into the future, into the past. when this happens, can we accept this as a natural process of the mind? Can we thank the mind for checking in and then easily and effortlessly encourage it to come back to the breath? Can we accept that the mind just wanders? Take note when the mind does wander. Is there any sense of aversion, frustration, disappointment that arises when the mind is not focused? Use your awareness to check in with those sensations as the mind moves from the present to the future and back to the past and back to the present again. On occasion, it can be helpful to check back in with your mood. Is the mood pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? What can the mind be aware of in this moment when it comes to mood? If you can actually discern a particular mood, take a minute or two to locate those sensations in the body. How do you know that mood is there? What does it feel like? Can you gently rest your attention in the body where that mood is arising? What mood is characterizing this moment? occasion, you can move your attention away from the breath and use the actual physical body as your object of meditation. The body is referred to as the first foundation of mindfulness. There's lots of insight that can be had by using awareness to explore the body. A lot is stored in the body. And you can do this by engaging in what we refer to as a body scan. And this is how we do it. Take your awareness and move it easily and effortlessly to the top of your head. See if you can actually feel any sensations, real life sensations at the top of the head. A lot of heat leaves the head. Sometimes you can feel heat. You can feel pressure. See if you can rest your attention there. See if any sensations light up. Wherever there is life, there are sensations in the body. Sometimes they're clearer than others, but they're there. What does the top of the head feel like in this moment? Now gently move your awareness down to your face. What sensations can you actually feel in your face at this moment? You can check in with your cheeks, your nose. You can check back in with your breathing across the nostrils. Check in with your eyes. There's lots of tension stored behind the eyes, into the neck. What kind of sensations are alive and well in the face right here, right now? On occasion, the mind may wander. When it does, we just easily and effortlessly bring it back. We find a location on our face and we look for the sensations there. You may find if you can hold your awareness on some part of the face, maybe the cheeks, maybe the chin, that in the beginning you might not notice any sensations, but after a minute or two, new sensations will arise. So we keep our attention moving. Take your awareness and move it to the back of the head and down into the neck. Oftentimes we can immediately feel some tension as the neck becomes our shoulders. You can move your awareness around to the throat. What sensations do you feel? Could be the temperature of the room, the density of your muscles, the touch of your clothing, any sensations, prickling, tingling. And take your awareness and move it down from the left shoulder and gently sweep it down into your bicep and your elbow, checking in with your forearm, down into your hand. What does your left arm feel like right now in this moment? Where do you notice the most prominent bodily sensations? Oftentimes we can feel heat coming off the palm of the hand. might even be able to feel individual fingers if the mind is quiet enough and discerning enough. See if you can feel your individual fingers on your left hand. And then let's keep things in balance and do the same thing with our right arm, starting at the shoulder, gently sweeping down through those dense muscles, into the forearm, the elbow, back down into the other hand and the fingers. What sensations are you aware of in this moment? See if you can discern the individual fingers on that hand. If the mind wanders, we simply bring it back. See if we can land somewhere prominent on the right arm, shoulder, hand, wherever the sensations are strongest. If you have trouble noticing sensations, that's fine. Just bring your awareness to a particular spot and wait. Just be patient. See what happens. And let's take in the core of our body. Let's bring our awareness up to our chest. Move your awareness over your heart. Linger there for a second or two. Bring your awareness into your belly. Oftentimes there's all kinds of gurgling sensations in the belly. You can allow your awareness to drift gently from the chest to the heart to the belly, back again. You can linger in one place if something is there that you want to take note of. Or you can just keep your attention moving in that whole area. We'll then wrap our awareness around to the back. Upper back, lower back. You can move your awareness up and down the spine. Back pain is a chronic condition. For many people, you might be able to feel tension in the lower back, maybe some discomfort, a twinge or two. Allow your awareness to drift down. Because we're all sitting, we should be able to have some sensations in our butt as it touches the cushion or the chair, pressure at least. As we move into the legs, we've been sitting for a while, so you might notice some discomfort in the legs. Quads are pretty dense muscles. You might feel tension, a little aching in the knees. Drift down through the legs, through the calves. See where you notice the most prominent sensations. What do your legs feel like in this present moment? And then we complete our body scan journey at the feet. How are the feet doing today? Can you feel them? Can be helpful to Just scrunch up the toes and hold it for a second and then release. It's an easy way to get in touch with feet sensations. Are they warm or cold? Are they asleep from the sit? What does it feel like in this moment? The last part of our body scanning practice is just take in the entire body, all as one focus point. Just feel the entire body. Where do you feel sensations now? Try to take in the whole body as a living, breathing organism. What does the body feel like in this moment? You may find that there are new sensations that you didn't notice when we began. Now let's take in 3 long, slow, deep breaths. And this time when you do that, breathe in as if the whole body is inhaling and exhaling. Breathe into the whole body. Slow, deep breaths. For our last couple minutes, I invite you to check back in with your mood and your emotions. How are you feeling in this moment? Pleasant, unpleasant? Neutral? Is the mood the same or different than it was when you began? Try and use your awareness to be present with mood. Where is that mood in the body? How do you know you're feeling that way right now? In a minute, I'll ring the bell. Try to be intentional and mindful as you move from the state of consciousness you're in now. Be mindful as the eyes open slowly, your body readjusts. Do that slowly and feel the sensations in the body as we come to a close in our meditation. We have our master of mindful movement over here, Jim Dalton, who will be taking the helm for a bit.
So we'll be in touch with our standing form now. Maybe go up on the toes and back on the heels and feel the various muscles and tendons and bones cooperating to lift and ease down. And we can also drop down. Just feel that. We're solid. There's earth element here in this body. And then we can spread our wings and go up on the toes and fly with the cranes and the herons and the eagles. Different mood than just clunking down. Might even say some of us are graceful. Okay. Then checking into the mood. There's an immediate feedback loop where what we think of often determines how we feel, and what we're sensing can often move into a new mood. So let's, I'll do this second Shibashi routine where we sink and then open to the side and just feel the energy kind of centering, getting centered left and right. So you're opening and sinking and lifting in a way that matches the right side to the left. Certain kind of harmony, certain kind of mood. And one more. And then imagining a column, a pole from the top of the head to the point between the soles of the feet. And we'll bring our hands together and sink, and then come up and center the body backwards and forwards. We're leaning back a little bit, and then we're reaching out a little bit, but we're staying right on that midline. And again, there's a certain mood, a certain harmony when we have a reference point and we stay focused on that. Now I'm going to turn around, and as I step to the right, I'm going to look to the left and stretch my arms apart and then lift my right toe and look to the right. So now there's a whole different set of sensations from that centered opening to putting this energy into movement. The neck is moving, the shoulders are moving, the feet are moving, the legs are moving. And then we'll do the same thing on the left side. So reaching out, we'll turn in to the right. Rocking back, we turn to the left. Relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the neck, feeling the weight shift. You have to work a little bit more to create harmony. But it does develop with a little practice. Okay, then the feeling of being centered on 2 feet was one thing, but now shift the weight, let's say, to the tree side of the yard side of the room, on that leg, and just run the palms along the outside of the right, this side leg, and then switch. So we're balancing with one leg, and we're relaxing and receiving with the other leg. And the hands are kind of radiating into the soft leg, while the other leg holds us steady. So that's a different kind of integration. It's not a symmetrical balancing. It's a integrating complicated stuff. What's the mood when we do that? The sense of accomplishment when we don't fall over. And then pressing towards the trees, pressing towards the street, opening the shoulder on one side as we close down the other. This is called the, what's it called? Casting the nets. So it's like a fisherman throwing nets off the side of the boat. But what's happening in the shoulders? That's the important part. One is closing, one is opening. Again, there's an integration of movement. And this one's kind of complicated. If I don't fall off. We're going to go around in a circle and then point towards the tree and bring your foot back behind. And then point towards, let me do it this way. All right. Let's go towards the windows with the right foot behind. There we go. And then towards the tree with the left foot behind. That's clearer. All right. But we're integrating movement on the arms and the legs and looking to the side. And this amazing nervous system can put all this together. Then we come back to stillness and notice the exhilaration of the movement, and then we'll balance again on the tree side and push the heel towards the floor on the other side. So we're alternating our balance, creating a different kind of integration, sort of symmetrical, first one side, then the other. I almost forgot the other one. Okay, so the other one is to open and step back with the left foot and bow to the moon. We just had a couple of glorious full moon nights. The crane bows to the moon. But that center line that we organized ourselves around in the second movement is being challenged in this side, in this one. Okay, and then we come back to that center line and just pull up gently, press gently, and relax gently. So another way of harmonizing the nervous system, front to back, left to right. And then moving away from the trees, but looking at the trees and extending one arm towards the trees, and then the opposite, towards the street. The weight goes away, but the eyes go to the street, and vice versa. So this is parting the curtain, but feel the softness in the shoulders, the open hand. And a little more complicated, we're going to create two dragons. And at first, the dragons are going to rise up out of the sea towards the street and then plunge back in. And then they're going to rise out of the sea and plunge back in on the tree side. So, a rhythm of complex movement. Opening the shoulder sockets as we lift and then release down. Lifting and releasing down. And then calming down again, we just follow the waves across the bay, starting on the street side and then coming back from the trees. The mood changes when the sensations change. The breathing changes. And then we get a little more complicated again. I'm going to lift my right knee. First of all, I'm going to create a ball with my two hands and then lift my right knee and pass the ball off to the corner. Then lift my left knee and pass the ball off to the opposite corner. And notice the mood shift with more effort, more challenge to the coordination. Okay. And then opening to the side, both hands up, draw both hands in towards the center of the body. This alternating between more exuberant movements and then calming movements tells us something about the connections between the body and the mind. The brain is being soothed by the body at this point, whereas before the brain was challenging the body. Can you do what that guy up in the front is doing? This one's pretty easy. Now we're going to rise from the ashes like a phoenix, noticing the weight shift. Again, the soothing and smoothing out of a nervous system that's constantly being overstimulated. We're just cruising through these round movements. And body and mind feel better. And just to make sure we're still awake, we'll step towards the street and box both ears. This is a Tai Chi move, but it's also a massage for the lungs. Feel what's going on when you're back and your arms are open, your shoulder blades are together. And then when you bring your hands out in front, the shoulder blades separate. So someone's massaging your back, and it's you. Okay, enough exuberance. We'll just absorb the energy of the earth in a nice, peaceful, round section of movements. Receiving with the palms of the hands, grateful for the earth supporting us and feeding us with energy. And then once more, we'll lift up to the sky and get fed. Just absorbing the energy from above, balancing the energy left and right. And then bring your hands together in front of the chest and just feel the gratitude for having a body that's still able and capable. Connecting with the breath, noticing how easy it is to replenish the nervous system with new energy with each inhale. How easy it is to release toxins and tension with each exhale. The atmosphere provides what we need, and what we don't need, the atmosphere puts to work with the trees and the plants and the shrubs. So we're in this reciprocal exchange every moment of our life. Now I'm going to ask you a little favor, starting with your hands together. Just keep them together. And I'm going to open mine, and I'm going to ask you to sing me happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jim. Happy birthday to you. Thank you. Now, isn't that gladdening the heart? It's Wednesday, but I thought you won't. I'm going to get it now.
Good morning, Sangha. I am so grateful to be here today. No particular reason, just grateful to be here, grateful this place exists. No reason needed. So, for the rest of the morning, I believe we've got Dharma consults. Dharma consults. Kate is doing Dharma consults, but Kate stepped away for a minute. So, you can sign up for Dharma consults on the sheet all the way back there on the left side of the door as you face the door. And we have space for 3 of them starting at around noon when the Dharma talk is over with. And then we've got the potluck going in down. What's that?
What's a Dharma consult?
Somebody asked what a Dharma consult is. Gee. The Dharma consult is if you have questions about your practice or you want to start a practice and you just want some guidance, then one of the members of the Teachers Council, Kate, would be happy to talk with you about that. And if you have never had a practice before, it is very easy to get started. She can give you some basic instructions and get you going. And then we make Dharma consults available during the month. The teachers and the Teachers Council will make themselves available. You call me at the office and I can set up an appointment with you either by phone or in person, and they would be happy to check in with you from time to time to help guide you in your practice. And that doesn't cost anything. That is PIMC's gift to community. Is that a good explanation? Yeah, the invisible voice up at the top of the room says that that's okay. So we have a potluck that's going on. Please come and have some food and share time and talk and being in space with community. For those of you who have never been here before or who have been here for a while but don't feel like you know anybody, please come and see me afterwards if you feel in the least bit uncomfortable about going down there. It would be a shame for you to not experience the joy and the benefit of being with community just because you're a little uncomfortable. I can set you up with a Dharma buddy who will be your sort of like connection who you can talk to. That is one of the things that we do here. There are a few other things going on. So we have a couple of classes that are currently ongoing. We've got a basic mindfulness class and Eightfold Path class. The basic mindfulness class is taught twice a year. The basic mindfulness class is taught twice a year. The Eightfold Path class is once a year. They've done the first class. If this is something that you think you'd like to do, it may be possible to get in even though the first classes in these have already happened. So go on the website. You can see me after class, or you can go on the website and contact the instructors. They're very approachable and very responsive, and they can let you know what would be involved in that. Robert's Buddhist Psychology class is starting on the 18th. And that goes Wednesdays from 7 to 9. It's a 10-week class. If you have any interest in sort of like how the ideas of modern psychology and Buddhism kind of support one another, that would be a great class for you to take. We have Jim's Qigong half-day retreat coming up this Saturday, the 14th, from 10 to 2. If you like what he was doing during the break after the meditation, then that would be an excellent thing for you to do. We have a Karma Yoga pizza party that is coming up on October 21st, which is really, it really is about a chance to hang out with your community, eat pizza, have a good time, and get some things done while you're doing all of that. You can bring some tunes, bring your boom boxes. While you're doing stuff, you can chat, you can gossip. We've got something on the website, on the community page, where Robert had extracted this little thing about a conversation between the Buddha and his companion Ananda about the value of community. And that really is it. Really, in addition to sitting on the cushion, getting in here and taking it off the cushion and doing some stuff, but being with your people is a really wonderful way to not only uplift your spirits, but to take you further in doing your work of the Dharma. If you have any questions about that, see me. Let's see, what else do we have here? So Robert is currently on retreat up in Hollyhock. We have another retreat coming up with Robert at Brighton Bush. That is on the October 29th. I believe there is still space for that. If you have never been to Brighton Bush Hot Springs before, it is one of the natural wonders and one of the gifts of living in the northern part of Oregon. It's 2.5 hours away. It is a little piece of heaven that is very close to Portland. And it nearly burned in the fires. The fires came within a couple of thousand feet of Brighton Bush, but because they had a really active fire crew there, they kept it safe. And the opportunity to have some meditation time down there would be a real gift. So if you're learning about this now and you want to learn more about it, check out the website. Have I forgotten anything? All right. Well, blessings on your day. Thank you. Oh, one other thing. Talking about volunteerism. I do this from time to time. Volunteerism keeps this community going. There are a gazillion things to do that make it possible for this space to be held so that we all can come here and experience the groundedness and the peace that comes with being together and meditating. And in order to do that, people have to do stuff. Could all the people who have or do volunteer, who have volunteered or do volunteer, please stand up? Please just, if you have contributed any amount of time or any kind of effort at all to keep this place going. And to the rest of you, just if you want to show gratitude in whatever way that you can, I know that I am just quite grateful to all of you. And for the rest of you, if you would like to contribute, thank you very much. If you would like to contribute in keeping this place going, it is very easy to do. You contact me or you contact our volunteer coordinator, Kirsten. Got it. Kirsten is sitting over there. She'd be happy to talk with you about how you can engage more with this community and help keep it available for those of us who want it to be here. Now I'm done. Blessings on your day.
welcome back. I always feel so refreshed, Jim, after the mindful movement. It's like the best way to start off my day. And those moves were a little more complex than usual, huh? So we did start off with a little gratitude earlier in our sit. And on that same note, this is a nonprofit and we do operate on donations. A lot of those donations are physical labor as we vacuum the floors and sweep and bring stuff for the potluck, and the flowers here that you see, again, beauty of our volunteer work. You can donate to PIMC online. We also have, do we still have back there that's still there too, okay. I was talking to Avi, we've created this new system where we usually have a little iPad type kind of thing where you can give if you feel motivated. And Donna, the gift giving in Buddhism really is about generosity. It is part of the spiritual practice. It's a way of doing this versus this. It's about expansion instead of contraction. And we are all very grateful for those of you who can contribute in both your time and when available, when people can donate funds online or in the back of the room again. And that's how we keep this whole ship in tip-top shape, I guess. So thank you for those who are able to do that, because that's how we get by here. So, Dharma talk. I guess I'm giving a Dharma talk. My name's Gregory. For some of you, those of you who I don't know, it's so nice to see so many familiar faces and new people I'll meet today. I'm one of the teachers here at PIMC. And Avi was mentioning the Eightfold Path class, which Christine and I are teaching, and we only have the introduction to the class. So if you are interested in the Eightfold Path class, it is a 9-week class, and we go into the whole path and all of the little tools and techniques, and it's going to be awesome. We have, I think, 20 students signed up. It's going to be an awesome group. We had a great time the first day, but we haven't jumped into the material yet. It was just an introduction. So if you want to jump into that class, talk to me afterwards, or you can go online, talk to Avi. And that class is on Wednesdays from 7 to 8:30. And that's 9 weeks. And it does have one Saturday component, which is kind of a half-day retreat kind of thing that we're doing too on November 4th, I believe. So if that interests you, let me know. We can get you in. And that's an annual class that we have here. So in the spirit of the Eightfold Path class, I wanted to give a talk on the Eightfold Path, but I wanted to do it a little bit differently today. Normally, if I'm going to give a talk on the Eightfold Path, I would pick one of our infamous folds and give a talk on just something like skillful speech or skillful livelihood or wise mindfulness. Or I might combine a couple of them, and we might talk about skillful effort and a wise view, something like that. But today I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to explore the Eightfold Path in its entirety as a map of the Buddha's spiritual journey. And the Buddha described his journey as a sort of courageous adventure from suffering to freedom, from suffering to true happiness and contentment. And he describes the end goal of his enlightenment as being a state of unbounded compassion and incredible joy and tranquility and lasting happiness and contentment. That's how he describes the end point of his journey. And in my experience, the more we can understand how the Buddha mapped out this journey, right? He goes on this journey and he leaves this map behind, the Eightfold Path. So the better we can understand how he actually described his own experience, the easier it is for us to take that own journey and make it our own. Because even though we, in a sense, we walk in the Buddha's footsteps, there's been several thousand years of these practices being handed down from teacher to student, from teacher to student. And so although we're engaging in those exact practices and we're going through the exact same things the Buddha would have gone through in exploring his inner world, we have to walk the path for ourselves. We have to walk in our own footsteps. We need to personalize the path to make it our own. So it's helpful to kind of understand what lessons the Buddha learned on his journey to see if we can find a way of imbibing those own lessons so we can have that same success that the Buddha describes and move from suffering to liberation. So I thought I'd talk today just about a few ways that the Buddha describes his journey, and hopefully take those descriptions and extract some lessons for us as we walk the path. So what I wanted to do, I thought what I would do is give just a little brief touch of Buddhist history so we can kind of understand what world the Buddha was living in when he went on this adventure. Because there are going to be similarities to our world, but this was going on in the 5th century BCE, before the Common Era. They say now that they think the Buddha died around 480 BCE, but they don't know for sure. They keep finding new artifacts, so who knows. But it was a long time ago, to say the least. And the Buddha is born into a world of rich spiritual heritage. The Buddha is born at a time where these amazing and beautiful spiritual philosophies of Hinduism are already taking hold. They've already had religion and spirituality for 1,000 years before the Buddha comes along. So he's kind of a late player to the game, right? He's joining this club of spiritual seekers, but he's born into a world where there was some pretty heavy hitters before his time. And even before Hinduism, you have another, so they say, 1,000 years of Vedic ritualized religion before that. So the Buddha is like stepping into a long history of people who've come before him and have been exploring the nature of spirituality, the nature of happiness, the nature of suffering. He wasn't the first person to do that. Another thing that's interesting is that yoga was alive and well at the time of the Buddha. The Buddha didn't invent yoga, discover yoga. He was a yogi. He was practicing yoga, but yoga had already been around and was developed. So he would have been practicing some of the same asanas and pranayama that we would practice here on any one of the 2 million yoga studios we have in the Pacific Northwest in Portland, right? For him, it wouldn't have been that easy. He can't just like Google it and be like, where can I go practice some yoga? But like for us, it's just like, all right, within a mile, there's a yoga studio, right? So, and he probably would have had to walk, so, we could drive. A little different path. But so the Buddha was a yogi. He was already practicing those tools and techniques. Another thing that's interesting is at the time of the Buddha, taking robes and grabbing a begging bowl and heading out on a spiritual journey was pretty popular. It wasn't uncommon for young men to engage in that kind of activity. There were some women doing that as well, but of course, mostly it was the men. And so he was doing something that was kind of trendy. I mean, he was doing what other people were doing, and he was joining in. So he didn't invent that either, that taking robes and grabbing a bowl and heading off into the woods to seek his spiritual fortune. And there were dozens and dozens of wandering mendicants and ascetics who had little sort of tribes of students who would go out and create their little religious tradition, so to speak, their spiritual practices. And all of these mystics, all of these spiritual teachers, for the most part, had different definitions of what enlightenment was. They each had their own path that they had laid out. They had gone on their own journey. They had a different definition of enlightenment, and they would often sit around and debate whose enlightenment was the right enlightenment and this kind of stuff. And so that was also pretty common, that you had people with spiritual paths that they had developed and discovered and were teaching other people to walk those same paths. Another thing that's interesting is that the hot topic of the day in philosophical and spiritual communities was happiness. The hot topic turned out to be, is it possible to have true happiness? And what would that look like if we could achieve such a thing? And at the time, there were all kinds of different interpretations of whether happiness was possible. Now, of course, in this day and age, with all the psychology and neuroscience and mindfulness, the way we experience it, a lot of us are taking, self-help classes and yoga classes, and we have practices that we're like, oh yeah, this is definitely making me happy. So it's not as much of a hot topic in that way nowadays. But back then it really was. You had certain gurus and teachers who said that true happiness, that liberation from human suffering just wasn't possible. And that your best bet was just to try and indulge in sense pleasures as much as possible, because that's all you're going to get. So they were talking like spirituality, that kind of stuff. You want to just party, right? This is what I always refer to as the sex, drugs, and rock and roll tradition, where happiness is going to come from sensory stimulation. So that was certainly a path, if you can call it a path. There were other teachers that thought happiness was only going to come based on merits from your past life. So any kind of happiness you experience today is just because you did something good in a previous life. You can't get any more than that in this lifetime. And then there were other people who said that happiness is based on your socioeconomic status in the caste system. So people were born into these social structures. And if you're born into a particular structure, you have a certain amount of happiness that you're entitled to. And no more, no less. That's it. You don't get any more. Can't earn any more. And so that was also a common belief in some circles. So the Buddha is living in this time where people have pretty heavy views on what happiness is and whether suffering can be transcended. And so when he jumps into the game here, he really wants to know the answer for himself. He's asking himself, is it possible to have freedom from suffering? Is it possible to have true happiness? And so he takes robes and grabs a bowl and leaves his princely station. He was born into the warrior ruler caste. He was a prince. So he takes off and he ends up going and doing what we all have done, is we find a teacher and we study with a teacher and we hear their journey and then we try and practice what they did and we see if it works. And he spent, so they say, he spent like 6 to 8 years in training with a variety of different teachers of his day. Some of them were pretty famous. He started off with those who had the best reputation, so to speak. And two of these teachers, the Buddha supposedly completed their teachings. He studied with them, he did all the required practices, and at the end, when they told him that he had gotten enlightened, he said, this doesn't really feel like enlightenment. This doesn't feel like the happiness that I'm seeking. And so instead of staying in the tradition and becoming a guru, he left and went on to other traditions. So he moved through several traditions in which he was practicing tools and techniques where he had been told that he had completed his training and he didn't feel like he had. It wasn't working for him in the way that he was interested. So you see from the beginning that mindfulness practice, even in the way the Buddha did it, was kind of a series of trial and error, right? People tell us this practice works, we have to try it. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's the wrong or right practice for us at a certain time. So in a sense, we're walking that same exploration. So the Buddha goes through his journey and he gets to what he says is his enlightenment, his version of enlightenment. And then he creates the Eightfold Path, which is his map of how he got there and what he did to get there. And kind of a similar, I guess, metaphor or allegory for what the Buddha did, contemporarily speaking, might be, for example, like let's say you wanted to take a trek up to the top of Mount Hood, right? And you hadn't been there before. And so you might consult some experts who claimed to have been to the top of Mount Hood, right? You'd find someone who said they had been there. And then you might study with them and you might find out what conditioning they encourage you to do. You're going to have some hiking skills, some mountaineering skills. You might consult different experts about what kind of equipment to take with you so you get to be safe and reach the top of the mountain. You might look at some maps to see where you're going. And you might look at various maps from different people to see what kind of routes there are to get there. So let's suppose you got this education and then you go up and you make it to the top of Mount Hood and you're like, oh, there really is a top of Mount Hood. I'm here. I made it. And then you're a generous and a kind person, so then you draw a map for other people so they can get there, right? Because you're not selfish. You're not going to keep the route to yourself. You're going to let other people know how to get to the top of the mountain. And so you would draw diagrams and give cautionary tales of what to do and what not to do. You might promote certain gear that worked for you. Maybe you had a good pair of boots that really supported your ankles on the way up, or maybe you had a good tent that didn't leak. And so you're going to tell other people, hey, you want to buy this tent and these boots if you want to get up there. Like, take it from me, I've been there. You want to have good equipment. Or you might encourage several months or a year of cardio training or a certain amount of, again, mountaineering training or whatever, because you've been there and you've had the experience and now you have suggestions and wisdom to be able to let people know like what's going on that path. But what you also might do is throw out some warnings of things not to do, things that didn't work for you. So you might report back that some of the maps you had were outdated and didn't work. Some of the trails had been washed out and didn't get you anywhere. Or you might have like warnings like, make the third left at the big rock in the road, because that's the easier path. Like, don't take a left at the waterfall because that'll send you 30 miles in the wrong direction, kind of thing. So out of goodness of your heart, you're going to try and make the path as easy as possible for people to get where you had gone. And that's basically what the Eightfold Path is. The Eightfold Path is a synthesis of what worked and didn't work, in the Buddha's opinion, for him to get to enlightenment. That was his journey. That was his generosity to those that came after him. It was like, this is how I did it. This is what I think works in my experience, and I invite you to practice it. That's our Eightfold Path. So what I wanted to do today, the Buddha describes his Eightfold Path in a few different ways, and depending on time, I've got a few here that I wanted to just kind of go over. And again, in my experience, the way the Buddha describes his journey, he leaves these major lessons behind about spiritual practice that I think can be really helpful for us. And I also just think it's fascinating to sort of listen to his feedback, after having had the experience. How does he talk about what's necessary to know true happiness and be free from suffering? And so one of the ways that he describes his path is he calls it a direct path. He calls it a direct path. I was going to read a quote here from our infamous Satipatthana Sutta. The Satipatthana Sutta is the primary text that teaches us how to meditate. It describes Vipassana. It talks about the 8 folds of the path. And it's basically a very long description on how to do mindful breathing and body scanning and all of those kind of things. And it's interesting because the Satipatthana Sutta starts like this. Monks, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearing of suffering and discontent, for acquiring the true method for the realization of nirvana, enlightenment. I'll read it again. Monks, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearing of suffering and discontent, for acquiring the true method for the realization of nirvana. The direct path. So what did this mean to the Buddha, and what might it mean to us as we walk on our path? There's this story that I really like called A Handful of Leaves in the Pali Canon. And it goes something like this. It's more poetic in the actual text, but I'll try and do it justice. So the Buddha's sitting in a grove of trees with his students, and he reaches down and he grabs a handful of leaves, and he shows them to his students, and he says, "Bhikkhus, probably, or monks, the amount of leaves in my hand, are these larger or smaller than the amount of leaves you see in the trees?" Now, of course, when I hear that, I think it must be a trick question. So, of course, the monks answered, well, obviously, the amount of leaves in your hand are quite smaller than the leaves in the trees. And he says, exactly, just like my teachings. And what he says is, of all the philosophical insight, all of the spiritual practices he engaged in over his years of training, the amount of tools and techniques that actually contributed to his happiness were a handful of leaves compared to all of the other things he engaged in on his path. And so what he did is he acknowledges that there is all kind of spiritual philosophy and different practices that he said did help him, right? He had wisdom and knowledge, but his goal was to find happiness and liberation from suffering. And so he says the amount of those tools and techniques that just really led to happiness was really small, just a handful of leaves. Throughout his teachings, when people would come to him and ask him about kind of spiritual philosophy or complex questions that weren't really focused on happiness and suffering, oftentimes he would actually sit in silence and ignore them. He would just sit and not answer the question, right? If it was not about happiness, he was like, I'm not going there. And so he would literally, this is the story, he would just sit there and meditate until they asked a question about how to be free from suffering, and then he would respond. But if not, he wasn't having anything about that. There's this great quote that we see throughout the Pali Canon that the Buddha says every time, when he did respond to people who asked more philosophical questions, he answered like this. Is this echoing? Is it just me? Okay. In my ears, I'm hearing myself I feel like a robot. So he answers like this. Both formally and now, it's only suffering that I describe and the end of suffering. Both formally and now, it is only suffering I describe and the end of suffering. So this idea of a direct path for the Buddha, again, he had a very specific goal. It was happiness. That was his goal. There's all kinds of different things that he tried and practiced, but at the end of the day, it's helpful to know that he did not want to get distracted by a lot of conceptualization and a lot of theory and stuff like that. The Buddha's path was a path of practice. It was about meditation, being mindful, bringing mindfulness into your day. It's really focused and direct. It's very specific in its intentions. And so the general lesson, for him, obviously, he went on this huge journey because he's trying to figure out what this is. So he's going all over the place trying to figure out what's going on. So in a sense, we're lucky because his claim was, look, I've kind of figured out that some of this is extraneous and I'm not going to include it, so you don't have to make those same mistakes. But in the end, we still have to walk the path for ourselves, right? Even though someone might say, don't turn left at the waterfall. For me, I'm going to turn left at the waterfall because I want to see what they actually were warning me against. So just because someone says that they've eliminated some things that you don't need to do, more than likely we're still going to try and do them to see what's going on, right? It's just that's the way it's going to go because that's human nature. So the lesson that I take from this direct path is the idea of getting distracted. It is very easy for us to get distracted from the focus of our practice, which is to be free. It's easy to go off on a side tangent or get waylaid and reading Dharma books or doing all of this other stuff. There's so many things we can do that is not being mindful, right? That's kind of little caveats to our practice. And it's easy to get lost and distracted in these things. So I think the lesson really here is to be mindful of the ways that we get distracted. So you might consider this. What is the most common distraction that pulls you away from your meditation? What is the most common obligation or duty that tends to take precedent even after you have the best intention that you're going to meditate that day? Right? What are the things that really pull you away from being focused and direct about your own spiritual well-being, right? We always sacrifice our self-care at some point. And there are so many duties that can distract us, right? Like there's Twitter duties and Facebook duties and all kinds of things, right? Social media duties where there are things that you intend to be mindful, certainly, but then someone tweets something and you're like, oh, but wait, and I'll go do this. So even though the path is meant to be direct, there are so many ways that we can not make it that way. So the lesson from the direct path is just to be careful of your distractions. Look closely and be mindful in your daily life. What is distracting you from your own self-care? What's distracting you from your own liberation and your own commitment to practice? Most of us at some point set out to be committed to have a daily practice, even if it's just a few minutes a day. And even with the greatest intention, something gets in the way and we don't end up practicing. So just be mindful of that on your journey, that the path is intended to be pretty direct and straightforward, but the mind is going to wander, right? It's going to find something to distract itself from it being a direct path. So that's my kind of lesson from the directness of the path. Well, actually, I just thought of this in my own life. So, I do try to have a daily meditation practice, but I've noticed that there's this thing that happens, like I'll get off work early, and I'm all stoked, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go home, I'm going to meditate because I'm off work early, and I'll be more alert, and it'll be this great meditation. And I walk into the house, and then my cat's there, and so I play with my cat for a while, and then I'm hungry, so I'll get a snack, and you know how this is going to go, right? So, and I sit down in front of the TV, which is off, but I eat a snack in front of the TV, and then usually what happens is I remember that there's an unfinished episode of something, like from the previous night, oh, I have to go to bed, so I'll watch this tomorrow. And so you have to watch that because you don't want to get into a meditation before you watch the end of the episode, because that could be a distraction, right? And then by the time that's done, you're like, well, I'll just watch one more, and then I'll meditate because I still have time. And then my wife comes home, and I love to debrief with her about my day and see what's going on with her, and so that takes an hour. Then more loving on my cat, and then I'm hungry again because it's dinner time, and I've had a long day, and then I eat, and then I'm full and tired, and so then I hit the cushion, right? And my meditation looks like this, just I'm just going off. So distraction, right? We've got to be mindful of distractions. Best intentions, our mind's going to wander and get us distracted. Another way that the Buddha describes his path is he describes it as a middle path. You can look online, and there's plenty of books called the Middle Way Teachings or the Middle Path Teachings or Journey on the Middle Way, these kind of things. The Buddha describes his path as a middle path. And during the time of the Buddha, there were two major types of spiritual practices that people were engaged in. The first type of practices were actually torture practices. They were self-torment practices. They were very common among the monks. And this might include anything from wearing outfits made out of hair, human or animal hair, that are really itchy to put you in a state of constant agitation. They would not eat, not drink. They would lay out in the heat, go out naked into the elements. The Buddha himself, there's a story about, Robert likes to say, the Buddha became a 1 grain of rice a day man. And there was this practice at the time of the Buddha where monks would take a vow to only eat 1 grain of rice. And of course, there's another word for that, which is starvation. And they would starve themselves, and practitioners would die. I mean, it was serious. People would die doing these practices. It was not uncommon. And there is a story about the Buddha being so emaciated, and his muscles were so deconditioned from malnutrition, that when he went to bathe in the river, he couldn't get out, and someone had saved him. Again, it's a story, but it speaks to the practices of the time that he almost died in those practices. And when he was done with those practices, he reported something interesting back. He said, if you take suffering and you overindulge in it, if you lean fully into suffering in that way to where you're starting to harm yourself, you're going to be too physically and emotionally weak to be mindful. You can't be mindful when you're in that much pain. And he's like, it wasn't working for him, right? He's like, this isn't working. This is way too much pain. The idea was somehow you could kind of move through pain, that you could increase the pain so much that somehow you would transcend it. That was the idea of that kind of practice. At least for the Buddha, he said that wasn't a route for him. That did not work. And this is somewhat facetious, but I'm also glad that we don't do those practices here, because one of the great things about coming here on a Sunday is that we all leave alive, right? We all get out of the practices. Like, those practices would also not be for me. Like, I mean, maybe the hair shirt I could do for a little bit, but that's like as far as I could go. Like, I have a low threshold for pain anyway, so that's not going to work for me. So he advised us, don't go there. Don't overindulge and get lost in suffering, thinking that you just have to grit and bear it, and that you're just going to keep taking more on, and at some point you're going to break through, right? You don't need to do that, he was saying. On the other side of that, there are the self-indulgent practices of sensuality. So there were also, as I said earlier, there were these groups of students and teachers who would essentially just party. It was just, we will have as much sensual pleasure as possible. But the idea was, it really was a spiritual practice. The goal was to overindulge in as many sensual experiences as possible, to try and somehow free yourself from the craving, right? To somehow overindulge to the point where you wouldn't want to do it anymore, right? You go all the way in to somehow get out. So it was a spiritual, in all seriousness, it was a spiritual practice. And some traditions do have versions of that. But the Buddha reported back something interesting on his journey. He reported that the more he indulged in sensual experiences, the more craving he had for more sensual experiences. And it just became an addictive cycle, and it wasn't leading him to a sense of freedom or happiness. He couldn't get out. It was just creating another cycle of suffering for himself. So what the Buddha claimed at the end was that he had formed, the path that worked for him was a middle path, right? A middle path. And the way he describes his middle path, I was just thinking something. Maybe I'll clarify this. So the Buddha describes a middle path, right? Which essentially is in between this extreme overindulgence in pleasures and extreme overindulgence in suffering and pain. Now, oftentimes, and students often ask me this, and I certainly had this fear early on. When I had contemplated what it was to have a middle path, I presumed between pleasure and pain is neutrality. Like, in between those is going to be neutrality, like a grayed out area where, like, I wouldn't be suffering, but I wouldn't feel anything good either. It was kind of this middle road of nothingness. And I was afraid when I started meditating that meditation would kind of lobotomize me, like it would take out my moods or something. And of course, that's not what happens. But the middle path doesn't necessarily mean that our goal is just to kind of be able to sit and endure everything, right? Equanimity and non-reactivity is a tool we use on the path, and it's something we do engage in as meditators. But the goal is not to just kind of be impervious to reality and not be triggered or have any experiences on either side of the spectrum. It's not neutral, it's middle. So that helped me over time to realize, because I was a little nervous when I first started meditating about that. So the Buddha describes the middle way in this manner. He said that he noticed with his own suffering that the most common thing that happens when humans experience discontent and aversion to something that's not going well in our lives, there's a couple things we do. One thing that we do is we repress. We kind of push down the suffering, and we're like, I don't want to have this, and I'm just going to ignore it, and I'm just going to move on with my day. And that's pretty common. We've all had the experience of like, I'm not going there, right? It's common human reaction. Another thing we do is we run to the other side of the spectrum, and we try to distract ourselves by overindulging in some kind of sensual distraction. So instead of moving towards the suffering, we run over to the other side, and we get involved in this overindulgence in sensuality. So that's one thing that happens when we suffer. Another thing we do, naturally, is we take part in sensual pleasures just as a form of self-care and enjoyment as human beings, right? It's fun to do things that we enjoy, right? We're not monks here, we're not nuns, so we're going to take part in the sensual world and sensuality. And the Buddha acknowledged this. He said, look, we do this. We take part in worldly pleasures. But what he said was the problem becomes when taking part in the sense pleasures of the world becomes a quest for happiness, where we try to be happy by being stimulated or entertained. We seek contentment through stimulation. And the more we try and do that, what it ends up leading to is what the Buddha described is this cycle of compulsive, addictive kind of behavior where we're not any more happy, but we can't stop engaging in massive amounts of entertainment. You know, one episode becomes a season, becomes 3 seasons, this kind of thing. And I mention seasons a lot because you'll see in a second when I'm a big TV watcher, so this is my big hang-up. So the Buddha describes the middle way. What he ends up talking about is the middle way is using both sides of this equation skillfully for our liberation. We don't want to deny either side, right? But we don't want to overindulge in either side either, right? That was his experience. So the lesson for us is one of balance and moderation. The middle path means that our spiritual journey is one of balance and one of moderation. And the way that works is, on the suffering side, the Buddha encourages us to honor and embrace and lean into the natural occurrence of suffering in our lives. Suffering is a part of existence. It's going to be there. There's going to be pain and unpleasantness. There's going to be loss. We're not going to have access to things that we want. We're going to be separated from people that we love. It's a natural part of human existence. So the Buddha asks us to mindfully lean into that, to honor, accept it, use mindfulness to experience it deeply, but then use that mindfulness and that skillfulness to understand its nature so then we can get beyond it. So we lean into it and we honor it in order to get past it. But we don't overindulge in it. We don't torture ourselves, right? We don't wallow in it. We just honor that it's there and we use it as a tool skillfully. And I know, for me, I've been in situations where, although it wasn't purposefully a sort of torment practice, but it's easy for us to fall into a pit of suffering, right? You can be in a situation where you're so upset and you're so depressed, things aren't going well, that you almost don't want help and you don't think there can be help, and you kind of just like generate more suffering from yourself, right? And we see this when we have a hard time letting go of something like a grudge, right? Someone's wronged us in some way. We know that giving up the grudge would be great if we could forgive, but for the life of us, we can't let it go. And we just kind of create this kind of feedback loop where it's just dukkha, right? It's just suffering. So we try to use mindfulness to get out of those times when suffering becomes kind of like quicksand, so to speak. We want to not go there. We want to use suffering as a tool for liberation. Now, similarly, on the side of pleasures, right? Again, we're not monastics, we're not renunciates, so we're going to be taking part in fun and enjoyable things. But what the Buddha does say is that be mindful when you're taking part in the sensual pleasures, because for the most part, we're actually engaging in a lot of our entertainment and a lot of sensuality because we think it's going to give us some type of satiation or long-term happiness and well-being. And it doesn't. It just doesn't work. The mind's not programmed that way. I was just reading recently a neuroscience study that was talking about, they're basically starting to show that the more you engage in an activity that overly stimulates the mind, like in a sense way, like with dopamine and pleasure chemicals, the harder it is to find that activity pleasurable. So I'm not talking just like drugs and alcohol, but any activity where you overindulge in it over and over again, eventually you're going to need more of it for it to be satisfying, even if it's just things like television or Facebook and stuff like that. So it's really a brain thing, right? It's not like an ethical thing like sensuality is bad. It's not like that. It's just that the mind can't ultimately get content if that's the only mechanism we have for our sense of happiness. So what the Buddha encourages us to do, first and foremost, is to use meditation practice to learn to be present. Because being in the present moment creates an inner joy and an inner peace that's lasting, right? It's much more ultimately satisfying than our tendency to be addictive in some of our other types of pleasures that we have. So the Buddha encourages us to use meditation for joy, right? For tranquility and for ecstasy. The Buddha never condemns sensual pleasures outright. He just says they're not going to ultimately be satisfying, and you might want to have a backup plan. because in the end, it's not going to work. So you might want to get started on the mindfulness track so you can get some of that inner joy while you can still enjoy Game of Thrones or whatever's going on. So for me, the lesson here again is about balance and moderation. We don't want to run away from suffering. We don't want to overindulge in it, but we do want to honor it and use it. Same with pleasure. We do want to embrace pleasure, be mindful of how we're reacting to it, and learn its nature. See truly that it's not as satisfying in the way that we might think it is or how we're trying to use it. And I'll give you an example. Again, I was saying I'm like a TV watcher. So early on, I was into screenwriting and film, and in my early bachelor's, I was focused on it as being a film and writing major. And so I really like the medium of TV. I like TV, I like film and movies. And so, but I noticed this last year, I started getting to the point where I was like spending whole weekends like binge watching on Netflix. I'm like, oh, there's something new, and I would just watch the whole thing. Another thing I noticed I was doing during those times is that I was like eating a lot more, right? So I was sitting in front of the television eating. And so I had two things I had committed myself to doing this year, which was to be mindful of how I was consuming with food and be mindful of how I was consuming entertainment. And with my commitment to be able to understand like what I was actually doing this for and where that tipping point was between self-care, where you're unwinding, and then self-indulgence and self-harm, down the road. And although, the answer, what I realized is probably obvious, but the actual experience of it was really profound. Because I noticed this. Sometimes when I sat down to watch TV, the first couple episodes, I was really present, and it was really the sense of self-care. I had a long day at work. I didn't want to think about anything. I just kind of wanted to be distracted, in the healthy sense of being distracted. But then I found later on when I checked in with sensations that then there was like anxiety arising. There was something like, well, I don't want to do the dishes, or I don't want to meditate, right? There was this sense of aversion, and I was actually staying in front of the entertainment to escape from something. It wasn't actually, at that point, entertainment. Something else was going on. And so I started checking in with myself every time before I watched another episode, and I would do a body scan to see, what's my mood? Like, am I actually unwinding here, or am I averse to something? And I couldn't believe how much time there were sensations of aversion. I didn't really necessarily want to be sitting there. I just didn't want to be doing something else. And so over the course of this year, I was able to really cut back on the amount of consuming of media I was doing. And I ended up feeling a lot happier. I was able to get more meditation in because I wasn't stuck in front of the TV. And so that was pretty profound for me to see that there were times where I thought I was just doing what humans do, which is to sit down and watch something. But actually it was motivated by some kind of aversion, some kind of unpleasant emotion or mood, and I was trying to escape from. And it was very clear that that was there. Similarly, like I said with food, I would find myself kind of standing in front of the refrigerator, like trying to, I want to eat something. And so I made this commitment to do a body scan and to check in. And 90% of the time I was bored. I wasn't hungry at all. I wasn't even hungry. I was just bored. And so throughout this year, I made this real commitment to check in and try and only eat when I was actually feeling hungry, not because I was tired or bored or anxious or other things. And in doing that, I really started to be able to see, using mindfulness, how food felt as I was consuming it. Was it because I was frantically trying to change my mood? I like to, if I feel depressed, I find bread and cheese are great, or ice cream. I mean, there's great things you can do to immediately remove kind of an aversive mood. But I found in doing that, I ended up decreasing my sugar intake. And so this year, just using, I found that I was exercising more, I was less sedentary, more mindful of food, but it started creating more happiness and well-being, and it just kind of boiled over into other parts of my life, I guess is what I'm saying. And it was really noticeable over the course of time that using that mindfulness to see these kind of sense pleasures that we use as self-care, like nutrition and media, suddenly become its own self-torment practice. So balance and moderation on the path is really, really helpful, right? Because the mind wants to overindulge on both parts of that spectrum. So the middle path. So we have a direct path, we have a middle path, and the last one I wanted to just take a little tour of is, of course, our eightfolded path. So we have this path that the Buddha refers to as eightfolded, which is got a lot of interesting dynamics, actually. So I think I should start by actually saying what the folds are. So our eight folds are wise or skillful view, wise thought, also known as wise intention or wise resolve, which is kind of our attitudinal orientation to our path. We have wise action, which is the virtue part of the path, our precepts, the ethical part, which then include wise livelihood, which is applying mindfulness and compassion to our work life, right? Both in the work that we choose and engaging with others in that environment. And then we have wise effort, which is again about balance, how we engage in the practice, what we practice, how often we practice. And then it concludes with wise mindfulness and wise concentration, which are more the meditative parts of the path. So we have these 8 folds. So why 8? Why not 3 or like 2.5? It could be a variety of different folds on the path. Well, historically speaking, the reason there's 8 folds is that yoga was already around at the time of the Buddha, and the 8 limbs of yoga is what the Buddha modeled his folds off of. So he's taking a common structure that was already around, and that would have been pretty palatable to other people at the time. Like, oh, 8 limbs, 8 folds, okay, I know what we're talking about. It's kind of a common language at the time. And it's not about the folds themselves. Each fold of the path, each category, has a series of very specific practices that we're supposed to do, things we're supposed to either add to our lives or try to give up, to co-create or cultivate and abandon. So the Buddha could have easily combined folds of the path. He could have put mindfulness and concentration in one and called that the meditative fold, and then we'd have a 7-fold path or whatever. So it's not really about the folds necessarily. But when the Buddha talks about the Eightfold Path, it seems very important to him the way he laid it out. And the Eightfold Path was the very first topic of his very first Dharma talk. And on his deathbed, it was the last topic that he talked about before he died. So the story goes. And on his deathbed, a student approached him and said, we've been practicing your Eightfold Path, and you went on this journey, and this is how you laid it out. But I'm curious, is there another path out there that gets to the same place? Like, is there another path that would do this exact same thing that you talked about? And his answer was interesting. He said yes. He said yes, as long as it does cover these particular practices under this. Like, the practices I've laid out are the minimum necessary. It doesn't matter the folds or anything else, but these few things that I've talked about, this handful of leaves, have to at least be in that path for it to work in the way that I think it does. So the Buddha was sort of attached, no pun intended, attached to this model that he had created. But the lesson for me in my journey on the Eightfold Path about this structure is something like this. As you start to learn about the Eightfold Path, you start to realize that the Eightfold Path is not a set of tools, but a way of living. Right? It's a lifestyle. It's a way of being in the world, right? Where you live your life with the dedication and commitment to be generous and compassionate and forgiving. And we practice mindfulness to heal, right? To encourage the healing that takes place. And it really is a way of life. We try to do more and more mindfulness and be more and more mindful throughout our day, and we take it into our families and our parenting and our workplace. So it really is intended to be a holistic and integrated way of being, right? It's not just like a technique or a tool. It's a way of living. It's a way of approaching the world, a way of seeing the world, a way of guiding our interactions with the intention of being free. It's for all beings, right? So we learn to be compassionate for our own well-being, but also for the benefit of all beings, our metta practice, right? We practice so we can share our merits with everyone. So it really is holistic in that biggest sense of the word. We're not we're not really just practicing for ourselves. We're practicing on behalf of everybody because we want others to experience well-being as well. And so it's interesting, at the time of the Buddha, some of the tools and practices that we see on the Eightfold Path were already being taught, right? And so there were many traditions at the time who only taught what might be akin to wise view, meaning you just do philosophical inquiry and you do philosophical debates and you do you read texts and you do chants. And there are traditions that just have that part to their teaching. And then there's other traditions that just use mindfulness, or not really mindfulness, but concentration practices, which lead to mystical and euphoric states and the jhanas in our tradition. So there were teachers that were teaching just sort of one fold of the Eightfold Path at the time. There were other communities that were practicing what would be akin to our loving kindness practices, and that was the main practice, if not the only practice, that they did, which was loving kindness. They focused just on loving kindness and generosity and forgiveness. And so these individual folds were not totally brand new. What was really unique to the Buddha is the way he thought you had to practice them together, right? If you've ever heard of Jack Kornfield's book, Wise Heart, I love the title of the book because it totally embodies the Eightfold Path, because the Buddha was very specific that it's a heart-mind training. You have to have the heart, but you also have to have an understanding of the nature of suffering. It can't just be one or the other. It was really integrative and holistic. And there's that kind of like sort of saying that says, wisdom without the heart is cold, and the heart without wisdom can be misguided. Because all of us have had experiences of being loved by somebody, but it actually was hurtful because we weren't being loved skillfully or wisely. So the Eightfold Path really does combine loving kindness, generosity, and forgiveness with I don't want to say philosophical, but a conceptual framework about the nature of suffering and a psychological theory about how to be free. It's a combination of the two. And so the Eightfold Path in that regard is really holistic. The lesson here for me has been when I first got into the Dharma. So I was practicing transcendental meditation and some other Hindu practices as a teenager. It was sort of a mystical path, a lot of concentration practices. And then when I was in college, I got introduced to the Dharma proper. And so I was initially interested. I'm like, oh, Eightfold Path, okay, this is kind of cool. It makes sense. There's kind of a logic to it. But then I got to the precepts. And so here I am, a college student. I was at Evergreen. If anyone knows anything about Evergreen, it's kind of where liberals go to party through their college years. It was a great school. I had a great education, but it's Evergreen. And so everyone in my little apartment that we all were getting into meditation and yoga, and it was like, oh, this stuff's great. But I was convinced that the Buddha had somehow made a mistake by putting in the precepts, because that just seemed unnecessary, right? Like you don't really need the precepts. You could just meditate and practice concentration, which feels great. I could feel the healing. I was definitely getting enlightened, and I wasn't keeping precepts to save my life. And so not only was I really averse to keeping the precepts as a college student, I was kind of like on this mission to prove that you didn't need them. Like I really wanted to prove that the Buddha was wrong and that somehow the precepts fell into the folds, and maybe early on it was a sevenfold path, and then someone shoved the precepts in to make it like a pain for me, right? I just didn't want to do that. It just wasn't going to go there. And it's funny now, because I still have friends who were meditators with me back then, who are still meditators now, and this has been 20 years. And they laugh because I'm always talking about the precepts. We have to keep our precepts. It's so important for the way the mind. So they always oh, do you remember when you were in college and your goal was to prove you could basically be kind of rude and inconsiderate and still enlightened? You remember those days? And it's yeah, I remember that. So the Eightfold Path is integrated. It's holistic. It's designed to be interdependent. Each part of the path mutually reinforces other parts. And so the lesson I learned was at the time I just wasn't ready for that fold of the path, right? I just pursued some of the other ones, and that was fine. I developed in the path, and eventually what I found, the sign of my own maturity in the practice, was when I could start to look at some of the folds of the path that I had left behind, that I was averse to, and start asking myself, why is it that these tools or practices in this part of the teaching weren't my thing? And starting to befriend them, starting to open up to them, starting to practice them. And that was a huge insight for me when I started to realize that certain parts of the path I'd kind of, just wasn't ready for, which is totally fine. So surprisingly, from this perspective, another part of the path that I really had a hard time with was the loving kindness practices. And again, it's facetious now, but I really was kind of why do I need to be loving to be enlightened? Why can't I just meditate? Why do I have to do all the gooey love part? I just didn't want to do that. And I was looking back, I was really angry. I was angry in my early 20s, and I was kind of bitter and recovering from some family stuff. So doing loving kindness was just not going to happen at that time in my life. I just wasn't ready for it. My heart was not open enough to engage in those practices. They were very abstract for me, and I just was I can't do this. So instead of accepting that I wasn't ready, I was kind of this isn't necessary. This is a mistake. Somehow love creeped into the path, and then someone put it in there. We don't need that. And so I was very averse. So I created a whole other layer of suffering by pushing away parts of the path and not looking at myself at the time and saying, I'm just not ready for this. This is not what I'm willing to do. It's not speaking to me. And nowadays, it's really funny, is I do loving kindness practice every day. My ritual is that I wake up in the morning and I hit my snooze button on my alarm, and then I do loving kindness practice for 10, 15 minutes before I get up. And then I go downstairs to my office and I do my actual meditation practice. But I do loving kindness practice every day, and it's like the highlight, of my mindfulness practice. Like I love the metta practices. I love the gratitude practices. And looking back, I just wasn't ready for them, and now I am, and that's great. But the take-home point for us on the Eightfold Path is just find out which folds of the path speak to you. Find out which ones are easy for you to understand, and which practices just like you love to do them, they're exciting, and do those and make them like your home base. But check in with the other parts of the path that you're not engaging with and ask yourself, what's the aversion? What is it about this part of the path that I'm not ready for, or I'm just not ready to take on? And just keep in touch with yourself as you go through. It could take years. For me, it took years. So it could be months, days, years before a certain fold opens up and starts speaking to you, and you're ready to look at that and find what the benefit might be for yourself. But in the end, it can be easy to kind of just focus in on one or two folds and just kind of forget about the other ones. So my invitation is like not necessarily to practice everything that the teaching has to offer, but just remind yourself that the other folds are actually there, so you don't get lost in just a couple and you don't get the full holistic effect of the Eightfold Path. So, direct path, middle path, folded path. That's the way the Buddha described his journey. And in the end, we have to, again, we may turn left at the waterfall if that's what we decide we want to do. We may do it differently. We may have to explore in a variety of different ways to make the path our own. But in the end, it is our path. It's not dogmatic. It's not like you must do this. It's more like, here's this invitation to do this thing I've done. This is where it's gotten me. Try it out. Modify it. Make it work for yourself, right? Engage it in your own, with your own personality and your own needs from day to day, year to year, and your practice will evolve in that way. In the end, we just have to own the path as ours, right? It's not religious in that way. It's just an invitation for a spiritual journey that someone else has taken, and their report back is, here's the basic map of how I got there, and we take that on as our own. Let's see. Well, I guess we have a couple minutes for questions if people want to ask questions. Again, the Eightfold Path is starting, so if you want to hop on that train, explore some folds that maybe, you're averse to, let me know. Questions? Do I have to turn off this one to turn this one on?
No.
Okay.
They work together.
Okay. It's red. I don't know if that means it's working.
Hello, hello, hello. Yep, it's going. So, one of sort of like my, I think metaphorically an awful lot, and the metaphor of a path that is folded 8 times. I don't get where that comes from. I don't know how to envision that or what that means. Huh?
You can keep that. Yeah. My answer is I have no idea, and I can. I've had the same problem, like folds, like I think of folding a blanket or something, and I have yet to find out, and I'm sure there's some kind of, I don't know what the Pali word or out of the Sanskrit for the word fold is, so that kind of like, that would be interesting to find out. I actually have no idea, but I've had the same response, like, is there a better, because sometimes I say categories, but categories is kind of weird too, it seems too academic, or the 8 parts, but that's kind of dry. I've often looked for a better word than folds because it's just kind of a weird word for modern parlance, but I have no idea where the root or the etymology of that is. Does somebody know? Because I have no idea.
I don't know, but I've been guessing for a long time. And I'll share. I used to be a potter, and in order to knead the dough, knead the clay, you folded it and folded it and folded it, but your goal was this harmonious, flexible, integrated something that could turn into a pot or a teapot or whatever. But it took folding, 100 of those in order to get the integration at the end. That's one thing. The other thing is maps, where there's little trails that fold in and fold out, but your general goal is at the top of the mountain, and you always carry your compass so you never forget the bearing that you need to come back to. But you might go off and see, because it's the season for the wildflowers over here, it's not going to take you 30 miles away. It's just going to be very enjoyable. And then you go over here and you can look at the fossils that are over there. You fold in all these different aspects of your life.
I love the Potter metaphor. And next time I give this talk, look out for that, because that's what I'm going to say. That's great. It's a beautiful metaphor. That's in the map one, even a folded map, like the way we fold, unfold. I mean, there's different ways. Of course, now I'm going to have to go try and look it up to see, but I like that the Potter one is great. That's a beautiful metaphor.
And I just thought of another metaphor that occurred to me. A guy I used to know who used to play poker competitively said that a deck has to be shuffled 8 times in order to be thoroughly randomized. So maybe it has something to do with that. Right, yeah.
That's great. We have time for probably 1 or 2 more questions before our kiddos come back.
I was just going to suggest 8 aspects of the path.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, based on what Jim was saying, 8 aspects of the path. Or 8.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the point, like Jim was saying, is it's the idea that you have these sort of separate practices, but in the end they have a common end point and they are interconnected. They are meshed together ultimately as they support and reinforce each other. One leads into the other one.
I think I can speak loud enough.
Some people have a hard time hearing. Oh wait, okay, sorry. The microphone is off and running.
Thank you. I'm in the class,
Yes,
which
great.
is really, I'm excited about participating in the class. So, one thing that you just talked about that really resonated with me is that early in your practice, you were kind of worried about the middle way as being this kind of lobotomizing aspect. And I don't want the practice to become a form of Prozac that kind of takes me out of this human condition that has both highs and lows. What I want, what I'm hoping, my intent, is that this practice will engage me more with the highs and lows of the human experience and actually allow me to understand that experience.
Totally. Yeah, beautifully put, and that's exactly what it does. Yeah, the highs and lows continue. What we learn to do is use those highs and lows, right? So they don't throw us so much, so it doesn't cause so much suffering and lead to the suffering of others. So it's definitely, at least for me, it has not been Prozac. But you're right, it does what you're saying, is it actually, in my experience, makes you more human, right? It allows us to honor the plethora of experience from the suffering to the pleasure, but it also frees us from being dependent on cycles of suffering. We can get out of those cycles of suffering, and it gives us the tools to be able to appreciate, but also not be thrown, right? We're going to have loss. The Buddha didn't say loss wasn't going to happen. Pain is still going to be there, but it won't completely topple the boat, right? It won't completely, because when that happens, we're no good to ourselves and no good to others, right? Oftentimes when that kind of, the throes of the kind of disappointments happen. So it helps us to cushion that bouncy ride. The bouncy ride's still going to go, but it adds shocks to the car, so to speak, right? Better tires. Let's do one more. I think you had a question, right? Thank you.
I'm curious, you had said that the Eightfold Path was his first teaching, was the Buddha's first teaching.
Yeah, it was a part of his first sermon, as they say.
So how old was he, and at what point on his path did he come to the Eightfold Path?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't say specifically. If I remember correctly, again, I'm thinking back, and this may not be accurate. My understanding, so the story goes, that he was in his late 20s, 28, 29, when he left home. And then there was what they say about 6 to 8 years of training before he felt like he arrived, and that was when he began teaching his model. So it was but I'm almost positive he was 28, 29, and they do say 6 to 10 years of training in there with a variety of different of the head gurus of his time before he made it up, or how he taught it. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't hear the kids at the gate yet. Okay, that's fine. Do we have? I think we do have some kids in there, right, today? Okay, yeah. w- okay, yeah, definitely.
I'm brand new to meditating, and you were talking about how you practice gratefulness this morning.
Okay, let's just have this one last question, then we'll make our circle.
Sorry, I'm brand new to meditating, and I was interested in something you had said about taking 15 minutes in the morning to practice a particular thing besides sitting to meditate. And it's the first time I've heard about that, so I was just curious. If this is something you add in after you...
Oh, it could be done as a formal. Sometimes I'll do my whole meditation like that. I just love that sensation of immediately starting with gratitude at the beginning of the day. And so I kind of do it as an add-on, but then there's times when I do that as my whole practice as well. So it's just, you can use it at different points kind of for different effects. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you more about it if you want. All right. Thank you so much for your attention. That's made our yeah, right. We do use this, don't we? I've never done this part before. So remind me, do we do
They have a song.
okay, they do the song first. Well, that's the end of the song going out the key. So
Yes.
well, I guess it's foreign to me. Hello. So returning home to the present. This is my first time in the smaller circle. I am so happy to be here. The vibe here is amazing. You guys should check this out sometime. We got some crazy loving kindness going on down here. So let's just get back in touch with the present moment for a minute. Take a couple deep breaths in. Do a quick scan of the body. What's the mood now after a couple hours of being in this wonderful community? What is the mood, and how do you know that mood is there? I'm really grateful to be a part of this community. I love to be here with you all. It's always so exciting and nourishing to come here on a Sunday with all these open and wonderful hearts. We stand in our circle, very similar to the Eightfold Path. We have all these individuals, but in the end we are interconnected, sharing the same human journey. Take a minute to be aware of the hands, the human hands on either side of you, these fellow travelers on the way on this bouncy ride. And take a minute to send them a well-wishing. What would you wish for these people that stand in this circle, large circle, small circle? What is your greatest wish for them to know, to have? And let's take that wish and unleash it on the world. Spread it out through Portland, through the whole continent, around the globe, all the human animals, everyone. Can we wish everyone to be free from suffering, to know true well-being and happiness, to be content, filled with joy? May all beings be free from suffering, know true love and true happiness. This is our wish. This is the ultimate goal of our practice, for ourselves and for others. Now, I see we're preparing for the conclusion here with our song and blowing out the candle. I see people are... Okay, we have singers. Okay, so I'm going to join your circle and hand off the microphone and hold the table.
So we both hold it. We will beings be happy. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
we have a potluck, so please stay.